pronouncing it correctly? Yes. He's a technical and creative director for Bannister Lake, and he'll be speaking on new methodologies in real-time data aggregation and management for broadcast presentation and distribution. Alain?
Thank you. So, yes, I will be talking about new methodologies in real-time data aggregation and management for broadcast presentation and distribution. It is a mouthful. I did not come up with this title, but alas, that is what I'm going to talk about today. And I'll be honest, when we first got chosen to talk about this today, I wasn't expecting it in the first place, because data, what is real-time data for broadcast? It's definitely not something that's sexy. That is sexy. Data is not sexy. So it's not like I'm talking about something like a new switcher or some new lights or a new video card or even a graphic. Those are sexy objects to talk about, but data is a little trickier. And it's evident because our PR person came up to our booth yesterday and said, you know, it's not something that's sexy because we have these switchers and we have these cameras sitting all around us and nobody's stopping by, but it's very essential. So how do we talk about data in a way where you want your clients to utilize the data and be lucrative and make it valuable? Well, today I'll talk about some of our experiences, that, especially myself, that I've come through in data aggregation. So one of the experiences is a station group. We've been approached by a station group, and they were looking for a branding solution. And the branding solution includes everything from branding network bugs to some show bugs, some snipes as well, and some crawls. Simple crawls such as everything from weather-related crawls to Amber Alerts and breaking news. So we had to come up with a solution for this, and typically it's quite easy to do. A reseller would come in and say, we'll hook you up with 50 different graphic systems, and he's happy because he comes up and makes a ton of money. The CFO is happy because he sees all these expensive systems inside their racks, and everybody thinks, okay, we're ready to go, and let's make some graphics. The problem is, you got millennials already geared up, ready to go, but they're overwhelmed because you have these graphic systems and you still have to create snipes and branding bugs and essentially graphics. If you have 40 stations, you got one for every half an hour, it ends up adding up to a lot of graphics. And there has been some networks that are still doing manual entry and manually creating these elements. So how do you solve this? Because you've got a bunch of millennial graphic guys and they're overwhelmed, they're overworked, and they're exhausted, and they're tired. So to solve that problem, you need a strong data backbone, some sort of database that can essentially help drive some of those elements. So in some cases, the graphic designers can create templates, basic templates where they can add placeholders for text or placeholders for images that can dynamically be updated based on data. So for example, time of day. You may want a special looking bug at a specific time, or later in the afternoon it looks completely different. And all of this is being driven by data as opposed to a custom house ID that traffic would typically use. Other examples would be being able to bring a traffic schedule inside of some sort of database that can include artwork and include time and hashtags and episode information, all linked inside a database so that an automation system can automatically import some of that information automatically. If the weather is sunny outside, perhaps there's a crawl that's on air, but as soon as it triggers a storm of some sort, then that's when you would get your Amber Alerts and your emergency crawls, and again, all driven by data. So that essentially creates a happy environment for your broadcasters and your designers, and at the same time you can save money and utilize those same individuals to do other things, set up virtual sets, do some data entry, or even work on some promotional marketing elements to help generate money for your network, and in general just improve the quality of your own network. As for newsroom and sportscasts, how would you utilize data? Well, we all know that newsrooms are shrinking down in sizes. Productions and companies are trying to save some money. So they're trying to save money, and so how do you utilize data? Well, in an election environment, it's quite simple. You have a bunch of people that get hired to enter data during an election year. They have plenty of money because you have a lot of eyeballs to monitor and see who's going to win the elections. Well, what happens after an election? You have, again, all this gear, but you're down back to your regular staff, and there still needs to have some scoring information or financial information, or even ways to aggregate and moderate some social media. And we're not just talking about moderating data to illustrate graphic boards and the typical stuff that you would see on broadcast television, but what if you could utilize data in other ways? So for an example, what if you're able to use a Newsroom solution and include some metadata and tags inside a script? So you would essentially write a script hours before the telecast and include some key tags inside your script that would be linked to a database of its own. And so when it's time to actually read the telecast on air during a production, that data is already updated in your teleprompter in real time, so you don't have to go and manually enter any of that stuff in the script. It's already included inside of your database. What about sponsorship? Same with the results. If a team A wins a certain final score, as soon as the final status of that game ends, you would get a particular sponsor, but as soon as or if another team wins or the opponent wins, you get a different type of sponsor. So now you're looking at a dynamic sponsorship based on conditions. And so a solution with data could look at additional sports or additional weather, or in this case, a financial solution, where if a stock goes greater than a certain number, then an ad for something comes up on screen. Esports is another environment where data has become quite lucrative, especially in my world where I've included a lot of data. But I'll give you an example. FIFA World Cup, it's pretty standard. For a typical game, a single game only, we're looking at a one-day tournament, one game at a time. There's 2 teams playing, up to 22 players playing, and you want to monitor all their stats, and the team stats, and the scores, and the game stats as well. There's a large budget, and you have a full production crew, so that's pretty standard. But what about an esport tournament? If you want to look at FIFA eWorld Cup, you're looking at a 3-day tournament with 2 leagues, up to 32 games being played at a single moment, up to 436 games being played in total with 64 teams. So that's a heck of a lot of data and a heck of a lot of people to monitor and watch and come up with stats. So in this scenario, they're typically smaller budget because it's an esport tournament and there's not as many people, but the demands are still there. Production still wants to have the headshots and the matchup boards and the graphics and the versus boards. So how do you come up with a solution? In our case, it was a strong data backbone, means to be able to take APIs and data inside a centralized system so that when we can trigger and call up certain graphics, they'll all appear at the same time. Another useful solution for this would be using some of that data. So we know where some of these people come from. We're able to have individual streams being sent off to specific countries of origin. So if somebody from Brazil is watching, they could have their own custom stream with data that's included from the eSport tournament and showcase only their home scores and players from their home country. You can save money as well. Recently, and actually next week, I'm off to Manchester, and the production manager asked me, well, what about 2 CGs and 2 operators, or do you want to go with the same solution? And I said, not necessarily. We had a very strong data backbone last year. So last year, as opposed to having the 2 operators and 2 CGs, we've established a strong data backbone, so we only need now the 1 operator, because essentially that 1 operator has the templates pre-built and can call up elements on the fly. Down the road, it will end up saving them quite a bit of money because we're now on year 2, and next year, year 3 and 4 and 5, it won't cost as much as the initial capital that was invested inside integrating data for that production. Another event that's similar to an esporting that we ended up working on was the US Open, something that happened last year. And it's something that's very similar. It takes 14 days, there's up to 16 games, 18 games being played at the same time, 800 games in total with 800 players. So again, we're back at how do you monitor and aggregate all those stats and being able to call up some graphics in certain venues on the fly and immediately. Well, again, the whole data backbone. And we had to be able to put some practice schedules in the practice venues, and in the food courts it would be showing games and game results. And of course on the big screen we had to show upcoming matches and events going on around the venue. So again, our solution to doing that was having that, again, database and populating elements all over the different screens. So the company I work for is Bannister, and we have a methodology to do this. And whereas some solutions out there have custom development for being able to produce some of this stuff Our solution is to try to include any type of data type inside one single system. And the way we do that is we compare things like badminton or tennis or hockey or even eSports, and they all have different data types, but in essence, in its core, it's still just text, it's still data, it's still key value type pairs, and that's essentially what we're doing. We have an expandable database where we can basically take in any type of API and expand the database in order to filter and aggregate and moderate all that type of information. So that's essentially how we're taking care of this, is by using an expandable key and value pairing inside of our database. And what this also allows us to do is to standardize some of these elements. So whereas tennis, hockey, badminton, and FIFA, we were able to take in any type of those data, but then convert them and standardize them in a single type of data so that it can be used across all the different types of graphics. And as a graphic designer, it makes it easier so they don't have to go off and try to figure out what a player's names tag is going to be or a game scores tag is going to be. It's all pretty standard. So to finalize this, just basically I want to emphasize, for any company that wants to go and try to create a workflow or an environment, you have to think about data. It's easy to install and purchase hardware equipment, but oftentimes a production company will end up forgetting to invest in data, which in the end will help make things a lot more efficient, whether it's for news, weather, traffic, or to help enhance a culture or interest inside of your community and grow financially and help make things more efficient. So thank you for your time. I hope I helped make data sexy again. Are there any questions? We are located at South Hall, NDI Central. If anybody's interested to come and visit us, come on by. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.